Gentlemen, still here. At the C8 debate, a lot of questions, a lot of information to get, a lot of answers to get from the four candidates that are up here. So let's continue with the round of questions right now. Here is the moderator, Bruce Ash.
Thank you very much, Garrett. Candidates, we're on to a whole new series of questions about energy, national security, and immigration. We're going to start with Mr. Sinton in this round. Dave, how do you plan to deal with the hundreds of thousands of illegals living in Arizona, and describe your solution to the national security and the public safety problems created by the federal government, who has been unable or unwilling to enforce the law?
Yeah, unfortunately, since President Reagan's last attempt at this, we've had 4 administrations that have done nothing to secure our border. There are 2 issues here, ladies and gentlemen. One is immigration, the other is border security. Border security comes first. Border security is more than just an immigration issue as well. Border security, as you well know, is about the security of our nation. We all know what's coming across that border now, not only narcotics, but also in the way of weapons and other contraband. So we have to fix that first. When that is secure, then we can have a discussion in this country about what to do those who are here illegally. And there are several options and opportunities available for Congress to discover and to consider. Amongst those, first of all, is no amnesty for breaking into this country illegally. Second, then, is to find out what will be the disposition of a new classification for those people who have been in this country and have not committed any crimes, and what we might do with them. And finally, making sure that anybody who has committed a crime is incarcerated or deported immediately.
We have got to secure our border. This is a national security threat. We have transnational criminal organizations trafficking weapons, slaves, drugs, and money into our neighborhoods here in southern Arizona, and the federal government has failed. We know how to do this. We need a combination of barriers and fences where appropriate, manpower at the border, which is the front line in this war. We need to use technologies that we have. We need to use air air support in order to do that. We know how to identify, track, monitor, and intercept. We're just not doing it. The federal government is failing. In addition to that, we need to make sure that we are enforcing the laws that we have on the books. If you can't get a job and you can't get benefits, there's no incentive to be here. So we've got to secure the border, we've got to enforce the laws on the books, and we do need to look at streamlining our legal immigration process so it is not so painful and that will continue to disincentivize others from coming across illegally. First, address the national security threat.
A great step would be to take back the presidency in November so we have somebody in the White House. That one always gets a cheap applause, but in all honesty, we need someone there who will not sue the state of Arizona when we are enforcing our laws and passage rate laws. That's what we need. We don't need new laws. We don't need any new laws in this nation. We have great sheriffs here in this state. We can enforce the laws on the books. As far as the people that are here, it costs $3 billion a year to educate, incarcerate, and hospitalize illegal immigrants. We can take care of this problem with things like the I-9 system and E-Verify. I hire people all the time, and every one of them go through the I-9 system. If the government will enforce that system, as they have in the past, the last time they seriously dug into that system, there were literally groups of people heading the other way. If we do that, if we stop the jobs, no illegal immigration policy, and then we can focus on getting those cartels after we build our double-layer border fence. Thank you.
Well, the first thing you got to do is secure the border, there's no doubt. The American people will not trust the government on any kind of immigration reform after what happened in 1986. They were promised that the law would be enforced, and the government broke that promise. You have to restore the faith, and the way you do that is you secure the border by every means possible. You got boots on the ground, sensors, technology, whatever it takes. I endorse the Cattlemen's 18-point plan known as the Rob Plan, named after slain rancher Rob Prince. That plan is a comprehensive plan to secure the border. The next thing I would do is enforce the law, like we did here in Arizona. That's why I voted for SB 1070. All that does is enforce federal immigration laws. Could you imagine this for a minute, when I get to Washington, D.C. and stand on the floor and look all those guys in the eye and tell them, look who sent me up here to tell you I voted for SB 1070. Let's fix this immigration system. Let's enforce the law. No amnesty, no path to citizenship that for people that broke into this country. You come through the front door, you sign the guest list. You don't sneak in the back door and raid our refrigerator.
Continuing in this vein, would you support a constitutional amendment to repeal the 14th Amendment, which gives anybody born in this country automatic citizenship to the United States of America? Martha McSally.
Look, we need to focus on securing our border first. My priority when I go to Washington, D.C. is to get our debt under control, to get the economy going again, and to deal with the national security threats that are affecting our nation, which includes securing the border. So those are going to be my priorities. We have got to take this seriously because it is a national security threat. You know, the foundation of the 14th Amendment was never intended to be what it is today, as you all know. And so it's embarrassing that we have, do you know we have hospitals in Tucson that are advertising in rich neighborhoods in Mexico for them to come have their babies here so they can actually become citizens? I mean, this is just absolutely ridiculous. So we need to make sure that we are addressing this issue by enforcing the border security, by addressing this at the strategic level, while we're also trying to get Americans back to work and enforcing the laws on the books.
The answer to your question is no, I do not believe we need to repeal the 14th Amendment, because I do not believe the 14th Amendment grants citizenship to somebody who illegally enters this nation. That amendment was put into place after the Civil War to right some serious wrongs we had done in this nation. It was never intended to do what it's doing now. We need to pass simply a clarification piece of legislation through the House of Representatives, and Lord willing, Harry Reid's no longer in the Senate, so we can get somebody there who will sign it. And once that is done, once we can clarify that the 14th Amendment does not grant citizenship in that way, this problem is officially taken care of.
Well, there's a lot more to the 14th Amendment than just the immigration piece. And the 14th Amendment clearly states that the Congress shall determine the criteria for both immigration and citizenship. So it shall be the Congress that simply can pass a simple law and say the only way you become a U.S. citizen in the United States is if one or both of your parents are U.S. citizens. Most other countries already have that. We're one of the few that has birthright citizenship. And you can also establish clear criteria for people that can come here legally. And you can do that with a simple act of Congress. We can do that. You do not need to go jerking around with the 14th Amendment. The Congress has that power. Just simply get people up there that have the guts to put a bill like that out on the floor and vote for it. And I will do that.
I concur. Can you imagine the demagoguery if we try to change or repeal the 14th Amendment in this country? That's too painful and it's totally unnecessary. I agree. A congressional bill that would clarify who gets to be citizen of the United States, one or both of you, the parents being legally in the United States, would fix this issue and do so quickly.
Continuing along in the border security area, do you support the expanded use of unmanned aerial vehicles, drones, to be law enforcement against domestic targets?
Absolutely. As long as it's the proper law enforcement agency. Currently what we have on our border is not just a cartel problem. We have Hezbollah being funded and organized by not only Iran but by Venezuela. Hezbollah is recruiting right beside us here in order to try to get radical Islam, get control of these routes in the United States, and have them enter our nation. And in the same way we fight terrorism, and will always fight terrorism abroad, we will fight terrorism like that here at home. We can bring our drones back from Afghanistan and use them to fight terrorists right here that are attempting to enter our nation.
Drones are really expensive. General Atomics builds the Predator. Those things range from anywhere from $100 million to $1 billion each. You don't need that. You can get a simple fixed-wing aircraft. You can put a forward-looking infrared FLIR ball on there, put a pilot in it, or you could do like they have in Fort Huachuca. You can put a blimp up in the air that's really cheap with a camera that can see 50 miles into Mexico and 50 to 100 miles in each direction that can keep eyes on that border. You don't need to spend billions of dollars. There's a technical imperative problem that this country has. Sometimes keeping it simple, stupid, is the way you solve the problem. You don't have to spend billions of tax dollars to secure this border. You can find cheap, cost-effective ways. You put the technology and the type of technology out there that you need, you put the boots on the ground, and when somebody crosses that border, you scarf them up, you put them in jail, and you deport them. That solves your problem.
I'm running to be your representative in Washington, D.C. So over the past 6 weeks, I've sought the wisdom of those who live at the border. And this is what they've told me. This is what they've shown me. This is what I would take to Washington, D.C. because they know more than anybody in Washington. That is the fact that the border requires several simple steps. One, in the urban areas, they want the double fence. It works. There are certain other areas across those great ranch lands where they prefer to have the pipe and rail system or the Normandy fence system so that animals can cross back and forth freely and the water can flow as well. Then there are other areas that are so far frontier, there's not going to be a fence or of any kind be built there. What they've all told me, the wisdom from there is fixed-wing aircraft to monitor the fence. Unless the fence is monitored constantly, there is no point in having it because every man-made fortification has been breached in the history of this planet. It happens there now, and they know best. I would take that to Washington, D.C.
Well, I've had the privilege to spend a lot of time with these ranchers down on the border, and I'm absolutely blessed that men like John Ladd and Danny Smith are now endorsing me after we've had long discussions about these types of things. You know, I've planned air operations like this before in Iraq and Afghanistan. We have a combination of manpower on the ground, plus fixed wing, rotary wing, plus drones. I've actually worked with drones personally, commanding my squadron in Afghanistan, and they do have some benefit of monitoring for long periods of time, but it's like, they're like looking through a soda straw. They can't find anything, but they can monitor it. The Predator B is way too expensive for being used on our border here, so I do support a combination of, again, manpower, barriers, fences, technologies, plus rotary and fixed aircraft with people in them. And if you have some lower cost unmanned aerial vehicles that can help with tracking, then that should be a part of the solution tactically. But the higher level ones that we're using in combat right now is just absolute overkill. So we gotta combine those all together, but the Predator is just a little bit too much for that mission.
Thank you. We're going to change the topic just a little. We're going to go to energy. The President claims to have limited powers to control the escalating cost of energy and gasoline prices. The President's Secretary of Energy has testified before Congress he believes gasoline prices ought to be higher. Congress has done little over many years to develop a comprehensive energy policy. Name the two most important energy proposals you would propose to the U.S. Congress, not only to reduce the cost of energy, but to ensure a low-cost source of energy without having to rely on unreliable countries. I believe, Mr. Antonori, it is your turn.
Number one, I would expand the use of nuclear power. There's no reason that in a country like this that's clean energy and plentiful energy, we shouldn't be, anything that moves should be running on petroleum. Anything that doesn't move shouldn't be running on petroleum. Why are we heating homes and firing our electrical generation plants with oil when we can do it with coal and nuclear power? That's the first thing you do. Second thing you do is you get government out of the way of allowing the exploration for oil. You incentivize them, you issue leases, you generate money. Well, you know, in Arizona, when the Forest Service used to issue timber leases, it used to actually make money for the federal government. The Forest Service didn't need a dime of your tax dollars to run the entire Department of the Interior. It paid for itself because we issued leases. This president has stopped that. It is costing you billions now because all those employees now have to use your tax dollars to pay themselves. Issue the leases, let the Forest Service and the Department of Interior fund itself, encourage oil exploration, increase domestic production. That will drop the price of oil and make it cheap.
Dave Smith.
Looking at the room tonight, I'm making the guess that most of you could remember what it was like when we took on the Soviet Union, and particularly the space race. And I remember very clarity thinking that could we ever put a man on the moon? We did that and have gone on.
We're now talking about Mars. Are you telling me that we don't have the technology to make a mix of energy solutions for this country? If our engineers, if our researchers were allowed to go forward with those, yes, nuclear is in the mix. So is clean coal. So is petroleum. All of these energy products are available to us. That includes the energy technology of the future as well. From everybody I've talked to who's in the business says that solar is about 10 years out. Let's continue going across the board. This president says that he wants higher gas prices and wants to lower costs for food, groceries, and clothing in this country. Only this guy could come up with something like that. I want to know, Mr. President, what comes to the White House that's not delivered by a truck with diesel, natural gas, or gasoline in its its engine? Thank you.
Well, I know we have a lot of veterans in the crowd, and if there's one thing you learn in the military is if you don't have a strategy and a plan, you don't know where you're going. So we have to have a strategy. That strategy needs to include diversification. We need to be able to drill oil where it's available and stop blocking that because we're going to be on fossil fuels for a long time. So we need to be using the assets that we have in America. We need to build the Keystone Pipeline so that we tighten our relationship with a great ally just to the north of us that continues us towards energy independence. We need to regenerate our nuclear capability, which is going to be running out about 2025, so that needs to be a part of the mix. We also need to realize that we're in a global energy market, and part of the reason prices go up is instability in places like Iran. So we would stop dealing with Iran from weakness and actually deal with it from strength. We've wasted 3 years, and we need to make sure we have a smart understanding in foreign policy and engagement in order to keep those prices down, in addition to a strategy that's diversified.
Well, let's speak very briefly about what our president has done with his limited powers. He blocked oil drilling in the Gulf and then sent $3 billion of your money to Brazil so they could drill for oil. And then with 14% real unemployment in this nation and gas at over $4 a gallon in 10 states, he blocked a pipeline that would have lowered the cost of fuel and created 20,000 jobs in the United States of America. That's what he's done with his limited powers. We need new coal plants. Currently, the EPA is blocking any new coal plants. Coal is currently 45% of our energy grid. It is abundant. We have all we need. And when it comes to oil, we have significantly more oil in this country than Saudi Arabia. Drill here, drill now, and pay less.
Our presidential candidates have talked about where they think gas prices should be. From each of you, and we'll start with Senator Antonori and move across, give us your goal as to where gas prices should be. Senator Antonori.
$1.50 to $2.
Dave said
Again, I remember hearing something about the law of supply and demand. When we get the government out of the way, I think government will, the supply increases, the demand's not going to go anytime soon. I think that lowers our prices somewhere, if you index against what our prices were throughout the 60s and 70s, somewhere between $1 and $2.
Martha McSally.
I sure liked when we paid less than $1, but that was when I was a kid. But driving that Chevette that we talked about in one of the other debates. We need to take this seriously, obviously, to make sure that gas is affordable for everybody. And doing the things we talked about in the last question will do that. And ideally, I'd like to be paying somewhere between $1 and $2 myself.
Jesse Pellet.
Well, I certainly can't go higher than the other candidates on the stage. 50 cents, as low as we can possibly get it. The point is we have an abundant supply. Now it'll fluctuate with demand and then they'll stop producing oil at some point in time, but as low as we can get it. But just remember everyone, Jesse Kelly said the lowest number on this stage.
Yeah, but I set the bar.
I want you to become a retailer as soon as possible.
All right, our bonus question in this round is on foreign policy. The Obama foreign policy team appears to be using Israel as its surrogate to destroy Iran's nuclear capability. What advice should the GOP Congress give to the president to protect American interests in the region, short of committing force to protect America and our allies from hostile nuclear-equipped Iran, and to prevent the consequence of a nuclear confrontation? Mr. Senator.
Which president? Because this president is not going to listen to anybody with a tusk in front of them. I guarantee you that. But if we had rational discourse in Washington, D.C. right now, we'd be talking about our great ally Israel and what we could be doing behind the scenes in the region. We have to understand who Iran is. We have to understand the ancient nature of the relationship between the Iranians, the Persians, and the rest of the Arab world. We have to understand that not everybody in the Arab world is very happy about a nuclear-equipped Iran. I think we need to do everything we can in that region to encourage the Arab leadership in the neighborhood that is still stable, that hasn't gone through their amazing Arab summer, and can be spoken to so that they can start putting their influence in the area as well. And if necessary, if Israel finds it necessary in its own defense to attack Iran, the United States must stand forward with Israel the entire time and get everybody in that neighborhood they possibly can on board, whether it's overt or not.
We cannot tolerate a nuclear state sponsor of terror. This is not just a threat to Israel, everybody. This is a threat to the free world, and America is a leader of the free world. So we need to stop talking about this like we're sitting back as spectators and hoping Israel, does something or doesn't do something. A nuclear Iran is not in the interest of the free world. This is a threat to us. They are sponsoring terrorism through proxy wars, through Hezbollah, which are present not yet in Mexico, but also in Bolivia and El Salvador and Venezuela and other places. So this is serious business. We need to take the lead. We need to use all elements of national power as a leader of the free world in order to turn this thing around. Diplomatic, economic, and visible military planning as a deterrent with our allies. This is not just about Israel. We need to be lockstep with them and in leadership in order to get this threat out of the way.
Thank you.
We should do anything and everything we have to help stand beside and stand with our best friend in this world, and that's Israel. The great news is Israel can take care of their own affairs. They are very, very tough. Our most important support we can give them, on top of intelligence, on top of anything else they need, is simply verbal support. We need a president to stand up in front of the world at a podium and for once not apologize for this nation, but stand at a podium and say, America stands with Israel and the rest of you leave them be. And Israel will take care of their affairs. They're able to do that. And to bring this clear back to energy for a quick second, it does tell you how important it is that we start embracing American energy and American oil. Do we want gas prices in the future to go up and down based on what countries like Iran and Saudi Arabia do? Or do we want to go up to Alaska for our oil?
Just like the United States, Israel's a sovereign country. Sovereign countries have an inherent right to defend and protect themselves from any threat, foreign and domestic, just like we do here. If the Israelis feel threatened by Iran and they feel it necessary to strike Iran, they have a right to do that. We have a right to support them as our ally in the region, and we must support our allies. Because we've been supporting our enemies over the past couple of years. We got a president that hugs Hugo Chavez and then basically takes the president of Israel and tries to give him a little history lesson, and then got taught a history lesson of himself. So I guess they didn't teach history at Harvard because he really blew that. Netanyahu schooled him. He got him all up to speed. And then what I would do is I would send, if I were president, I'd send Ahmadinejad the movie 300, and with nice little cards say, hey, remember Thermopylae, because they got their butts kicked there, and they'll get their butts kicked again.
It's probably not a coincidence that the White House invited the Muslim Brotherhood from Egypt to the White House last week, and a Grad missile slammed into Eilat within 24 hours. Our double bonus question, because you guys are awesome. President Obama has used U.S. military assets without the consent of Congress during his term of office. Do you believe Congress has ceded too much of its powers to the Commander-in-Chief? And when you become a member of Congress, what would you do as CD8's representative to preserve the power of the legislative branch and the checks and balances which the U.S. Constitution calls for? And I believe it is Ms. McSally.
Thanks. The executive branch does have some very limited powers by the War Powers Act in order to act quickly when national security interests are at stake. And those powers need to be limited. The way Congress needs to be involved in that is by holding them accountable and by not funding anything that's more than just a very limited attack that's within immediacy and national security interests of America. So Congress has the power, they just need to execute it and show some moral courage that you don't continue to fund things that you believe were not within the power of the executive branch to fund. We've not declared war in a very long time, and we've been fighting several of them. So we need Congress back in the game of their constitutional responsibility, and they do that through funding, through cutting off the money. And the War Powers Act are very limited and needs to stay limited, but Congress has got the power of the purse.
There's a reason the founders of this nation gave Congress the black and white authority to declare war and not the President of the United States. And that reason is because your representative works for you and he's your representative. The people in this room that have family members in combat or have been to combat should not have to write an email to the White House that they know will never get read. They should be able to drive up the street to their congressional representative and ask him or her to their face to justify a declaration of war. That's what the founders intended. Congress has that power, the President does not. We need to get back, to, once again, to the Constitution of the United States of America. It was our founding document. It's one of the greatest things ever written, and it is the path back to prosperity in this country.
Yeah, the reason that was put in the Constitution is clear. When you commit American blood and treasure, you better have a little bit of a national discussion on it and make sure everybody gets an opportunity to weigh in on that. And that's why Congress has the authority to declare war. We've negated that through the War Powers Act, and we've been continuing to fund these conflicts. And sort of just Congress, ever since the old Gulf of Tonkin resolution, not having the real guts to declare war. We were attacked on 9/11. We know who our enemies were. We know where they came from. We know who was harboring them. I don't see why, after that, the people of this country wouldn't have supported the President of the United States going to Congress and saying, Congress, we were attacked by a foreign enemy that wants to destroy our country and our way of life as we know it. I want to go to war. And the Congress should have had a vote. And when we committed, and as one of those guys that set foot on that dirt and lost a lot of buddies over there, I would have been much better off and felt better if I knew my buddies were over there fighting because everybody in this country wanted them to be there and we were going to go there and we were going to win it, not just go there to play games. We go to war, we go to fight, and we go to win.
On the subject of the United States Constitution, Article 2, Section 2, the United States President is not responsible for the economy. He's not responsible for energy program. The number one thing he does, he is or she is the Commander-in-Chief of the United States military. General Washington, when he resigned his commission as the Continental Army commander, said it would be a civilian who would be placed in the Oval Office, and a civilian was going to need to be responsible for the United States military with the oversight of the Congress, just as you've heard here before, as prescribed by our Constitution. It was done so for a reason, a very good reason. We do not have a king. We are not subjects. The President of the United States must understand his or her responsibility with the United States military and never, ever commit it unless it is for a specific goal and has the intent to win immediately.
Okay, we're going to take our second break, but you don't want to go anywhere because we're going to come back in just 3 short minutes with questions on health care, the budget, entitlements, and taxes. This is the CDA Debate, live on KNST AM 790, 97.1 FM.